I used to be the untouchable crown prince of the elite financial world. Back then, I casually saved a Mafia princess who was running for her life from her own ruthless family. I hid her away in my private villa, personally tending to her wounds and teaching her every ruthless political strategy I knew. As she lay trembling in my arms, she gently stroked my Adam's apple with her blood-stained fingers. Her voice was raspy and dangerously seductive as she whispered, "Young master, once I take back everything that is mine, my life and my body will belong completely to you. But fate is a cruel joke. My family's massive empire collapsed overnight, and I was reduced to a stray dog that everyone wanted to kick to the curb. Just to stay alive, I fled to a gritty little border town and started running a rundown barbecue stall in the night market. When our paths finally crossed again, she had morphed into the incredibly powerful queen of the criminal underworld, surrounded by a terrifying army of heavily armed mercenaries. As she strolled right into my greasy little barbecue stall, I was absolutely terrified, desperately burying my face deep in the thick grill smoke. I was praying to God she wouldn't recognize me, but she marched straight up, tilted my chin with the cold barrel of her gun, and breathed hotly against my ear. "Boss, have you had your fun hiding? If you don't come home with me right this second, I will absolutely level this entire place, tie you up, and lock you to my bed." "Yo, boss, 10 skewers of pork kidneys, make 'em extra spicy." A loud, obnoxious shout snapped me right out of my brief daze. I shouted back a quick, "You got it," skillfully grabbed a handful of raw skewers and tossed them straight onto the roaring charcoal fire. The heavy cumin and fiery chili powder burst into a mouth-watering, rich aroma under the intense, crackling heat, mixing with the greasy smoke and blasting right into my tired face. "My name is Ethan. I used to be the Golden Crown Prince everyone bent the knee for in the elite financial circle. But now, I'm just the owner of a beat-up barbecue stall in a forgotten border town, a greasy, washed-up guy scraping by on selling cheap meat skewers. Even though I'm only 27 years old, it feels like a lifetime. It's been 5 agonizing years. I honestly thought I was just going to rot away in the mud like this for the rest of my miserable life, until the violent screeching of brakes entirely shattered the hustle and bustle of the night market. A dozen top-tier luxury black SUVs, looking like a pack of silent, deadly beasts, surrounded my tiny barbecue stall, so incredibly tight that not even a single drop of water could slip through. The loud, rowdy customers were so completely terrified that they instantly went dead, silent, poking their heads out to watch with a wild mix of curiosity and pure fear. The car doors swung open in flawless unison, and dozens of massive dudes in black suits and sunglasses stepped out, gripping gleaming guns out in the open. Radiating an aura of absolute, terrifying oppression, they brutally and swiftly cleared out the entire street. The very same customers who had just been shouting their drink orders at me ran for their lives, practically scrambling and crawling over each other to escape. Cheap tables were violently overturned, and glass beer bottles shattered into a million pieces all over the concrete. I just froze dead on the spot, awkwardly clutching a pitiful handful of raw meat skewers in my sweaty hand. My heart was pounding so violently against my ribs that it felt like it was going to burst right out of my throat. She came. She actually tracked me down after all this time. My pure gut instinct was to hide, burying my face even deeper into the choking, thick grill smoke, praying to God it would work as my camouflage. But it was useless. Those custom-made, dangerous black high heels stopped with absolute chilling precision on the greasy pavement right in front of my feet. The tips of her designer shoes were polished to a brilliant, flawless shine, looking entirely out of place in this filthy, grease-stained mess. I didn't even dare to look up. I could only catch the incredibly familiar, cold, and razor-sharp scent of her perfume, forcing its way aggressively into my lungs, instantly overpowering the heavy grease and the pungent smell of cumin. It was her absolute favorite, Rose of No Man's Land. "Boss," she finally spoke. Her voice was ice cold, razor sharp, and carried a faint, barely there smirk that made my entire body violently shudder. I played dumb, pretending I hadn't heard a damn thing as I flipped the meat skewers on the grill even frantically faster. A vicious drop of boiling hot oil splattered onto the back of my hand, burning with an agonizing sting. "Business seems good," she taunted, saying it again. Suddenly, a hand wrapped in a sleek black leather glove reached over, brutally snatched the skewers right out of my grip, and carelessly tossed them straight into the dirt. Then, a piece of cold, ruthless metal pressed hard against my chin, forcefully tilting my head up. It was the barrel of a heavy handgun. I finally looked at her clearly. Her face was just as breathtakingly beautiful and flawless as I remembered, but the soft innocence and youth from 5 years ago had completely vanished, leaving nothing but the cold, intimidating aura of an absolute queen who looked down on everyone else. She looked down at me, scrutinizing my every detail like she was staring at a pathetic rat in a gutter. But deep inside those stunning eyes, a thick, wildly intense possessiveness swirled a dark emotion I couldn't even begin to fathom. Ethan. She practically purred my name, forcing out every single syllable as if she were aggressively squeezing them through her clenched teeth. We haven't seen each other in 5 long years. And look at how you've let yourself turn into this wretched, pathetic mess. I desperately parted my lips to speak, but my throat was so insanely dry that not a single sound managed to escape. A crushing wave of intense shame washed over me, completely submerging my pride. The cheap, ragged t-shirt I was wearing was entirely covered in disgusting grease stains, and my hands were completely riddled with ugly burns and rough calluses. My entire body radiated a heavy, deeply ingrained stench of cheap kitchen smoke. Meanwhile, she stood there looking dangerously glamorous, perfectly radiant, and absolutely, undeniably arrogant. An absolutely insurmountable chasm loomed wide open between the two of us now. Still, she just smirked and lightly traced her cold gun barrel along my rough jawline, stroke by agonizing stroke. Her movements were intimately close, yet incredibly dangerous. Have you had your fun yet? If you don't come home with me right now, believe it or not, I'll level this entire place, then tie you up and lock you to my bed. Her words made my face instantly flush a deep crimson. It was a burning mix of raw embarrassment and absolute humiliation. All around us, her heavily armed bodyguards watched the entire scene unfold with dead, blank expressions. I felt exactly like a clown who had just been stripped completely naked in front of a crowd. Scarlett. I managed to force her name past my lips with heavy difficulty. Just let me go, please. She looked at me as if she had just heard the most ridiculous joke in the world, letting out a low, soft laugh. Let you go? She pulled back her gun, but in the very next second, she suddenly lunged forward, roughly grabbing me by the back of the neck. When you saved me 5 years ago, why didn't you think about letting me go then? Before I could even process an answer, she shoved me forward with a sudden, forceful thrust. She then barked an order to the guards beside her, "Take him." The 2 massive bodyguards stepped up immediately, flanking me on both sides and hoisting me up like a helpless, stray pup. I thrashed against their iron grip for a brief, desperate second, but they pinned me down so fiercely that I couldn't move a single inch. And just like that, I was tossed into the back of a luxury Rolls Royce in the most humiliating way imaginable. The heavy door of the Phantom slammed shut, completely cutting me off from the outside world. Inside, the car smelled intensely of expensive agarwood, a rich scent that clashed violently with the heavy stench of grease and cheap smoke clinging to my clothes. Scarlett sat directly across from me, elegantly crossing her legs as she stared me down with ice-cold eyes. A deafening silence filled the space between us. I stared down at my own hands. They were entirely covered in thick, ugly calluses and painful burn scars. Deeply ashamed and self-conscious, I desperately tried to hide my hands inside my sleeves, but she suddenly leaned forward, reaching out to gently place her hand over the back of mine. Her touch was incredibly cold, and her skin was impossibly smooth. Reacting as if I had just been scorched by fire, I violently jerked my hand away. Scarlett's movements froze in an instant. She slowly lifted her head and stared unblinkingly into my eyes, making the temperature inside the car feel like it had plummeted to absolute zero. Finally, the car pulled up right outside the grand, glowing entrance of the most luxurious hotel in the entire city. Flanked by the 2 bodyguards, I was marched straight up into the towering penthouse presidential suite. The heavy double doors shut tightly behind me, leaving the 2 guards stationed out in the hall like fierce, unmoving statues. Scarlett slipped off her tailored blazer, revealing a delicate silk camisole underneath. She sank lazily into the plush sofa and poured herself a glass of rich red wine. Then, eyeing me exactly as if she were inspecting a cheap piece of property, she commanded, "Go wash yourself clean." Her tone was sharp and completely absolute, punctuated by a brand new silk bathrobe being tossed right at my dirty feet. Standing completely still in front of the massive, floor-to-ceiling bathroom mirror, I stared back at the utterly dejected, pathetic, and thoroughly humiliated man in the reflection. It was me, and yet, it didn't look like me at all. I honestly believed that whatever pride I had left was ground into dust by 5 brutal years of scraping the very bottom of society's barrel. But in this exact moment, I realized my pride wasn't gone. It had just been buried deep down in the absolute darkest corner of my heart. And Scarlett was digging it back up in the cruelest way possible, viciously trampling it beneath her high heels. It took me a very long time to finish washing up. With every single layer of grime I scrubbed off my skin, it felt exactly like I was peeling away the tough, ugly camouflage I had relied on to survive all these years. When I finally walked out wearing that ridiculously out-of-place silk bathrobe, Scarlett was standing quietly by the window, swirling her wine glass. Hearing the faint noise, she turned around and walked toward me. Step by step, her heels pressed silently into the thick carpet, yet every single step felt like a heavy hammer pounding directly against my chest. She stopped right in front of me. The crimson wine in her glass reflected the dark, totally unreadable look in her eyes. Slowly, she reached out with her free hand, resting her icy fingertips right against my bare chest. "It's been 5 years, Ethan." Her voice was soft, carrying a faint, breathy sigh. "Your spine is still just as stiff as ever." My entire body froze up like a solid block of stone. I didn't dare move. I didn't even dare to breathe. I had no idea what she was going to do next. Was she here to repay an old kindness? Or to seek absolute revenge? Or maybe she just wanted to look at her former savior in his current, pathetic state, just to satisfy some twisted, dark pleasure of hers. Scarlett's cold fingers slid slowly down my chest, coming to a stop right at my abdomen, right over the jagged old scar I got 5 years ago, when I took a hit to cover her escape. "Does it still hurt?" There was absolutely zero emotion in her voice. I didn't answer her, but the terrified stiffness of my body gave everything away. She quietly withdrew her hand, turned her back to me, and pulled a small card out from the drawer of the coffee table. She slapped it hard onto the glass top. It was a pitch black card, the legendary kind with absolutely no credit limit. The PIN is your birthday. She looked right at me. Her tone was completely casual, like she was just chatting about the nice weather outside. "Forget about that pathetic stall of yours. You belong to me from now on." The blood instantly rushed straight to my head. Humiliation, pure anger, and an indescribable trace of disappointment exploded inside my chest. I thought she would at least ask me how I had been holding up these past 5 years. But wait, I had completely forgotten. We were no longer living in the exact same world. In her eyes, my current rock-bottom situation could probably just be solved with cash. Is Her Majesty the Queen simply paying back a little debt of gratitude? I let out a bitter, cold laugh, my voice incredibly raspy. Or are you just looking to keep a pet dog? Slap! Her expression shifted instantly, and she whipped a fierce, stinging backhand right across my face. The force was so brutal that it whipped my head to the side, and I immediately tasted the metallic tang of blood pooling at the corner of my mouth. "Ethan!" Her voice was absolutely trembling with suppressed rage as she grabbed my wrist. Squeezing with so much vicious force, it actually felt like she was going to crush my bones into dust. Do not throw my generosity right back in my face. The sudden, sharp pain cleared my head just a bit. I forcefully yanked my hand away from her grip and turned around, desperate to get out of there. "Do you honestly think you can still just walk away?" Her icy voice echoed right from behind me, and instantly, 2 massive bodyguards stepped up and completely blocked the exit. She wrapped her soft body tightly around me from behind, pressing herself against my rigid back. Yet, her voice remained utterly devoid of any human warmth. "5 years ago, you locked me away in your villa and wouldn't let me step a single foot outside. Now, it is my turn." I felt a sudden, crushing wave of suffocation, not from her tight embrace, but from the absolute despair of being completely controlled and stripped of every last ounce of my freedom. "I do not need your damn charity," I growled, heavily emphasizing every single word. Each syllable sounded like it had been dragged straight out of a freezing ice cellar. "Let me go." "Charity?" she murmured, letting out a low, dark laugh right against my ear. It was a laugh deeply tainted with a wounded, furious shadow. "I am simply taking back what rightfully belongs to me." She violently spun me around, forcing me to look her dead in the eyes. Her bloodshot eyes flashed with a mad, absolutely obsessive paranoia. "Have you completely forgotten what you promised me? You said my life belonged to you. Well, now that I am back, I am going to take your body, your heart, and absolutely everything you have right back." Looking at her near-manic state, my chest throbbed with a very real, sharp ache. Just how in the hell did we end up like this? Was the sweet girl who once trembled in my arms, promising to give me her entire life, and the ruthless queen standing before me right now, using her money and power to completely humiliate me? Were they truly the exact same person? "Scarlett," I took a deep, heavy breath, forcing my voice to sound as remarkably calm as possible. 5 years is more than enough time to change a whole lot of things. I am no longer the Ethan from back then, and you are definitely no longer the you from back then, either. We are totally even. Even? She literally chewed on that word. The intense fury on her face slowly started to fade away. In its place came a horrifying, bone-chilling coldness. "You honestly think we are even, just because you say we are?" I didn't want to waste breath arguing with her anymore. I violently ripped open the collar of my bathrobe, fully revealing the hideous, jagged scar slashed right across my chest. The brutal scar ran all the way from my left shoulder straight down to my abdomen, looking exactly like a grotesque centipede sprawling right across my bare skin. Is this? I pointed sharply at the scar, locking my eyes with hers. Enough to finally pay you back for your life? Scarlett's pupils contracted violently. She stared dead at that horrible scar, looking as if she were desperately trying to see right through it. Every single expression on her face, the arrogant dominance, the blinding anger, and that crazy paranoia just vanished in a flash, leaving behind absolutely nothing but utter helplessness and raw agony. This was the very first time she had completely broken her tough facade right in front of me. She reached out, her fingertips physically trembling as she tried to touch the scar, yet she didn't even dare to make actual contact. Is that from back then? Even her voice was violently shaking. I pulled my collar back together, quickly hiding that hideous mark, right along with the absolute last shred of my broken dignity. Yes, I closed my eyes tight, really not wanting to look at her face for another second. So, we owe each other absolutely nothing. The entire room fell into a deathly, suffocating silence. All I could hear was her rapid, heavily suppressed breathing. A really long time passed, so long that I honestly thought she was finally just going to give up. Then, suddenly, she spoke. It is not enough. Her voice was incredibly soft, yet it carried an absolute, completely unquestionable determination. It is nowhere near enough. How could one single scar ever be enough to pay me back for my entire life? Ethan, what you owe me can never, ever be paid off in this lifetime. I snapped my eyes wide open and looked at her in sheer, utter disbelief. What on God's green earth did she actually want from me? The deep pain in her eyes had completely vanished. Taking its place was an even deeper, truly terrifying obsession that sent a violent shiver right down my spine. She seemed to have severely misunderstood something along the way. Ding dong! The sudden ring of the doorbell completely shattered the suffocating, tense standoff in the room. Scarlett instantly regained her regal, untouchable, queenly composure. She shot me an incredibly cold glance. Stay right here and do not move. She walked over to open the heavy door. A man was standing quietly outside. He was immaculately dressed in a sharp suit, looking thoroughly sophisticated and highly refined, just casually holding an elegant, insulated food container in his hand. Scarlett, I had the hotel kitchen whip up some late-night soup just for you. The guy's voice was disgustingly gentle, his eyes practically dripping with blatant puppy dog adoration. Then, his lovesick gaze shifted right past Scarlett and locked dead onto me. The second he saw me standing there in a silk bathrobe, water still dripping from my freshly washed hair, that smug smile of his froze solid. His expression rapidly twisted from sheer shock into completely unmasked disgust and blazing hostility. And who the hell is this? He snapped at Scarlett. Even though his eyes were slicing into me like a pair of jagged knives, Scarlett simply stepped aside to let him in. My guest. Her tone was dead flat, completely drained of any emotion. The guy who happened to be Wesley was a hotshot rising star in the corporate world, and worse, one of Scarlett's most crucial business partners. Now, I had already read all about this guy's impressive resume. I saw it in some cheap, crumpled newspaper back in that dusty border town. Wesley slammed the insulated soup container down onto the table and marched straight toward me. He stopped inches from my face, looking me up and down with a gaze that felt like he was appraising a defective piece of trash on a store shelf. Scarlett, is this really the so-called savior you've been desperately hunting for over the past 5 years? His tone was dripping with absolute contempt and vicious mockery. A pathetic little cook from a greasy street stall. He spat the word cook like it was a curse. I clenched my fists so hard that my fingernails dug deep, drawing blood from my palms. From the very second he barged in, I knew tonight was going straight to hell. The way this arrogant jerk looked at Scarlett was practically overflowing with a toxic, intense possessiveness. To him, an unidentified guy who had just suddenly appeared in her room had undoubtedly become a massive thorn in his side. Wesley, Scarlett's voice turned absolutely ice cold. Watch your damn mouth. Yet Wesley arrogantly acted as if he hadn't even heard her warning. He even dramatically waved his hand, fanning the air in front of my face like I was garbage. He reeks of cheap grease and stale smoke. How absolutely pathetic. He let out a dark, scoffing laugh and leaned in close, hissing in a voice only the two of us could catch. Listen here, kid. I don't give a damn who you used to be. Right now, you're nothing but a stray dog Scarlett dragged in from the gutter. If you behave and play dead like a good boy, you might get a scrap to eat, but if you forget your place, before he could even finish his arrogant threat, Scarlett suddenly lunged forward and shoved him away with everything she had. The massive force sent him staggering back a few feet, nearly knocking him flat on his tailored suit. "What the hell are you doing?" Wesley stared at Scarlett in sheer, utter disbelief. Scarlett instantly shielded me behind her back like a deeply infuriated lioness, protecting her cub. "He is my guest. It is definitely not your place to tell him what to do." Her voice was piercingly cold, echoing with an absolute unquestionable authority. Wesley's handsome face morphed into something incredibly ugly. He stared furiously at Scarlett, who was standing fiercely protective right in front of me. His eyes were completely consumed by blind jealousy and deep, burning resentment. "You're seriously turning on me for his sake? Is a worthless piece of trash really worth all this? Whether he's trash or not, I know a hell of a lot better than you do." Scarlett fired back without even a millisecond of hesitation. "Now take your damn soup and get the hell out of my room." Wesley's face flushed a violent, livid shade of red. He pointed a trembling finger at Scarlett, choking on his own rage, unable to squeeze out a single word. But ultimately, he still didn't have the guts to completely burn his bridges with her. So, he shot me a wildly vicious glare instead. It was the look of a venomous snake, coiled tight and ready to strike, like he wanted to rip my throat out and swallow me alive. "Fine. Very well." He spat through tightly gritted teeth. "Scarlett, you are absolutely going to regret this." With that dramatic exit, he spun around, stormed out, and slammed the heavy hotel door. The thunderous boom of the slamming door echoed loudly through the tense room. I just stood there looking at Scarlett's back, which was rising and falling as she breathed heavily with lingering anger. My heart swirled with a mess of complicated emotions. Was she actually defending me? Or was she just fiercely protecting her own property, refusing to let some outsider touch what belonged to her? I honestly didn't know. All I knew was that my pathetic presence had only brought her more trouble. "See?" I finally blurted out, a bitter trace of self-mockery bleeding into my voice. "I will only ever bring you trouble." Scarlett slowly turned around, the fiery anger in her chest clearly not yet subsided. She looked deep into my eyes, her gaze heavy and complex. "This isn't your fault, is it?" I curled the corner of my mouth in a defeated smirk. "If I were still the Ethan from 5 years ago, do you think a punk like that would ever dare speak to me that way?" My own words felt like a jagged, rusty thorn, stabbing deeply into Scarlett's heart and twisting right into my own. Yeah, if I were still that untouchable, all-powerful crown prince of the elite financial empire, who the hell would Wesley even think he is? But right now, I was just a broke street food vendor, a colossal failure who couldn't even manage to look at himself in the mirror. Scarlett fell totally silent. The atmosphere in the suite grew painfully heavy and absolutely suffocating once more. I didn't want to stay here another second, choking on her pity while getting humiliated by her shiny new suitor. "I'm leaving," I stated once again, moving toward the door. "I already told you, you cannot leave." Scarlett's tone remained fiercely unyielding. "Why?" I practically screamed at her, my voice cracking. "What on earth could you possibly want from a broken, useless man like me? If you're just trying to repay an old favor, I don't want a single dime of your money. And I already handed my life right back to you. What more could you possibly want from me?" Staring at my sudden, raw emotional breakdown, a sharp flash of deep, undeniable pain crossed Scarlett's beautiful eyes. She didn't even try to answer my screaming question. Instead, she quietly turned around and pulled something fragile out of her designer handbag. It was an old piece of paper, yellowed with age, yet meticulously and perfectly folded. She slowly unfolded the paper and held it right up to my face. The second my eyes locked onto that page, my breath totally hitched. It was a literal life indenture contract. This was a joke document I had half-coaxed, half-tricked Scarlett into signing 5 years ago. Written right there in my own bold, sweeping handwriting were the words, "Scarlett voluntarily surrenders the ownership of the rest of her life, fully and completely, to Mr. Ethan." Right at the bottom was her crooked signature from back then, stamped with a bright red thumbprint. I seriously thought she had tossed this useless scrap of paper ages ago. I never in a million years expected her to actually keep it, let alone hold on to it for 5 whole years. I just stared at it, my throat going completely bone dry. The corner of Scarlett's mouth curled into a dangerously seductive smirk, dripping with playfulness and absolute triumph. "You're the one who made me sign this 5 years ago. Now I've come to exercise my ownership." She tapped the words, "Mr. Ethan," on the contract, and then pointed right back at my chest. "Ethan, for the next month, you belong to me. Starting tomorrow, you are my special assistant." I completely froze on the spot. A special assistant? This was a trap I couldn't possibly reject because it was a contract I had forged with my own 2 hands. But honestly, this was also the lifeline she was secretly throwing me. It was an excuse to stay by her side without totally shredding my last ounce of self-esteem. Looking at her devastatingly confident smile, a massive whirlwind of conflicting emotions flooded my chest. Ultimately, I just gritted my teeth and accepted it silently because I knew I didn't have any real choice to begin with. And deep down, in the absolute darkest depths of my heart, it seemed I didn't truly want to walk away either. Bright and early the next morning, elite designers and stylists from a top-tier luxury brand knocked on the suite door, immediately treating me like some priceless work of art. They aggressively measured my body for custom-tailored clothes and completely overhauled my hair. When I finally changed into that perfectly tailored haute couture suit and stood in front of the full-length mirror, I could barely even recognize myself. The guy in the reflection stood tall and imposing, his features sharp and incredibly striking, even with that lingering trace of sheer exhaustion in his eyes. After living out of the gutters at the absolute bottom of society for so long, the commanding aura belonging to the crown prince of the financial world had already returned by 70 to 80%. It felt as if those past 5 years of a miserable, pathetic life had been nothing more than a bad fever dream. Not bad at all. Scarlett's crisp voice suddenly rang out from behind me. She was rocking a razor-sharp, professional white skirt suit, her long hair elegantly pinned up, radiating an absolutely dominant, commanding presence. She walked a slow, predatory circle around me and nodded with immense satisfaction. Now this is the Ethan I know. In her eyes, there was this unmasked fixation and a profound sense of pride. Being stared down like that made me sweat a little, and I instinctively adjusted my tie. Later that evening, Scarlett dragged me out to attend an insanely high-end business gala. She boldly introduced me to every single person as her special assistant. That title was dangerously subtle. It gave me a totally legitimate position, yet it practically oozed an underlying, indescribable tension. Every single person at this gala was either filthy rich or terrifyingly powerful. The sideways glances they threw my way were packed with heavy scrutiny and burning curiosity. I tried my absolute hardest to keep my cool, but 5 years of being completely isolated from this world still made me feel super out of place. Like a total outsider, I just followed silently behind Scarlett. But then, we bumped into Wesley again. He clearly hadn't expected me to show up looking like $1,000,000, and a nasty flash of jealousy and pure resentment crossed his eyes. He swaggered over, swirling a wine glass, with a totally hypocritical, fake smile plastered across his face. "Oh wow, Assistant Ethan, you completely shed your old skin. I almost didn't even recognize you." He deliberately put some heavy, mocking emphasis on the word assistant. Scarlett's face instantly darkened, and just as she was about to snap back, I subtly shook my head at her. I couldn't keep hiding behind her forever. "You're joking, Mr. Wesley." I casually raised a glass of champagne slightly toward him and fired back. "Clothes make the man, right? I have Miss Scarlett to thank for this incredible suit." My attitude was neither overly humble nor blindly arrogant, completely forcing Wesley to choke down the entire stomach full of mockery he had just prepared. But of course, that jerk wasn't willing to just let it go. As luck would have it, right at that exact moment, the host of the gala, a massive real estate tycoon, was loudly discussing a highly complex overseas investment project with several big shots. Wesley's eyes darted around maliciously, and he suddenly yelled out, "Chairman Wong, let me introduce someone to you real quick. This is the brand new special assistant Miss Scarlett just hired. Mr. Ethan. Mr. Ethan here is a top-tier graduate. Why don't we let him give you some expert pointers on this project?" In a split second, everyone's eyes instantly locked onto me. Wesley was setting up this trap just to completely humiliate me in public. Because seriously, what could a washed-up barbecue stall owner possibly know about high-stakes overseas investments? Everyone stared with smirks on their faces, just dying to see a good joke. Chairman Wong also frowned hard, clearly annoyed that Wesley was making a mountain out of a molehill. Beside me, Scarlett's fists clenched so incredibly tight that the blue veins on the back of her hands were literally bulging, but I wasn't fazed in the slightest. I grabbed the mic, kept my cool, and strolled right up to the massive project display screen. The board was crammed with dizzying data and endless charts. But honestly, it only took me one glance. All that high-level business mastery and logic, locked away in my head for 5 long years, instantly fired back to life. This project definitely promises a mouth-watering rate of return. I started. My voice wasn't booming, but it echoed clearly through the dead silent room. "But you've completely glossed over 3 fatal loopholes." I grabbed a laser pointer and locked it onto a tiny metric on the screen. Number 1, the massive exchange rate risk. You've based all your shiny profit estimates on today's current exchange rate, but the target country is a political powder keg. meaning their currency is a ticking time bomb. The second it drops by more than 5%, this entire golden goose of a project crashes into a brutal loss. Number 2. Legal landmines. The Local Land Privatization Act is stuffed with sneaky, hidden clauses. Under specific conditions, the government can completely snatch back commercial real estate held by foreign money, and they won't pay you a single dime for it. And number 3, the absolute final nail in the coffin. Your target customer profile is completely upside down. Tapping into the ruthless knowledge I had built up back when I was still the untouchable crown prince, my sharp business instincts totally hit the nail on the head. Using bulletproof logic and absolute crystal clarity, I tore the presentation apart, exposing every single loophole and toxic risk hiding in the shadows. You could hear a pin drop in that massive hall. Every single person was totally paralyzed, mind blown by my brutal breakdown. Even that arrogant Chairman Wang did a complete 180. His face shifted from smug disgust to deadly seriousness, and finally, into pure, unadulterated awe. Meanwhile, Wesley's face had turned an ugly, choked-up shade of purple. The guy had set this whole trap up just to make me look like a pathetic clown. But instead, he literally handed me a stepping stone, letting me crush him and make an epic name for myself in a single flawless victory. When I wrapped it up, I tossed the mic back to the host and casually slid right back to Scarlett's side. The entire ballroom just exploded into deafening, thunderous applause. Countless elites were staring at me with brand new respect and absolute terrified wonder. Chairman Wang actually rushed over himself, gripping my hand like it was made of gold. "Mr. Ethan, you are an absolute genius. I truly owe you my life today. If it wasn't for you, my several billion dollars would have been flushed straight down the drain." He frantically shoved his premium business card into my hand. "We absolutely must keep in touch. Please, let's exchange ideas in the future." As I politely brushed off the suffocating crowd, my eyes couldn't help but drift back over to Scarlett. What I saw there was completely unmasked, a wild, almost fanatical pride and dark obsession burning in her eyes. Leaning right against my ear, in a breathless whisper meant only for me, she purred, "Tonight, you look absolutely delicious." My heart practically skipped a beat. Flexing my sheer competence at that nightmare of a gala instantly secured me a rock-solid foothold inside Scarlett's empire. All those snobs who used to glare at me like I was trash, now they were bowing and scraping with terrifying politeness. Scarlett was clearly thrilled with this chaotic little outcome. She started tossing massive, heavyweight projects my way for me to actually run, handing me an insane level of executive authority. Right at the top of that pile, a multi-billion-dollar semiconductor chip R&D operation working directly with none other than Wesley's company. "Consider this your ultimate test," Scarlett smirked, dropping a massive brick of classified documents right onto my desk. "And your biggest opportunity." I knew exactly what she was playing at. If I nailed this massive project, I could permanently wash off the pathetic label of being just some kept toy and evolve into her undisputed right-hand man. But let's be real, this wasn't going to be a walk in the park. I had just publicly dragged Wesley through the dirt at that gala, utterly shredding his fragile ego. There was no way in hell he was going to just let that slide. And man, sure enough, when we finally sat down for the project kickoff, Wesley was acting shockingly cooperative. He even had this sickly sweet, polite smile glued to his face, acting like our vicious showdown at the gala had literally never happened. "Assistant Ethan, please guide me well moving forward." He even had the guts to eagerly reach out and offer his hand. I reached out and shook it. The guy's palm was dead cold, and buried deep inside those smiling eyes was a toxic, venomous malice that he was trying desperately to hide. "You're far too kind, Mr. Wesley. Let's just learn from each other." Over the next few days, the project rolled forward with a totally unnatural smoothness. Wesley's team was happily handing over every single scrap of required data and all the high-tech support we asked for. My team whipped up the initial partnership blueprint in record time. It was all just flowing a little too perfectly. Honestly, it felt way too quiet. Leaning on those cutthroat survival instincts I had forged from years of weathering brutal corporate storms, a sickening wave of paranoia washed right over me. Think about it. How could a petty, fragile little snake like Wesley, a guy who holds grudges over breathing his air, just swallow that kind of public humiliation without a fight? There had to be a dirty trap waiting for me. I locked myself in my office and tore through all the contract data and highly classified tech files, over and over, dozens of times. Finally, in the dead of the night, I hit the jackpot. I found a deadly loophole, practically invisible to the naked eye, buried deep inside a core technical parameter that Wesley had slipped to us. That rat had altered a single digit, completely hidden 6 zeros deep after the decimal point. It was an obscenely tiny change, The kind of micro-sabotage that would never, ever trigger a red flag during any of our routine testing. But once that chip hit mass production, that tiny, practically invisible error would snowball out of control, causing the entire batch of chips to be totally trashed. We're talking millions down the drain, a complete financial bloodbath. And the sickest part? Wesley buried some insane legal jargon in the contract, dumping every single ounce of technical risk squarely onto our shoulders. The second things went south, Scarlett's company wouldn't just be left footing the massive bill, but as the guy running the project, Wesley would slap me with commercial fraud and gross negligence, sending me straight behind bars. Talk about a venomous, backstabbing setup. He played the odds perfectly. He figured, since I'd been out of the corporate game for 5 years, I'd be totally clueless about the latest tech and contract loopholes, and walk right into his trap. I just sat there, staring at the red circle I drew around the rig data on my screen, a literal chill crawling down my spine. If I hadn't caught this in time, the fallout would have destroyed us both. But I didn't flip out right then and there. If I tipped my hand now, Wesley would just play dumb and blame some random tech guy for a typo. No, I wanted to completely crush him. A single, fatal blow. I waited for him to get high on his own ego. Meanwhile, I quietly scraped together every shred of evidence of him cooking the books, right down to the server's back-end operation log. Then, I made a very important phone call. I called up Logan, my old man's former driver, and easily one of the most fiercely loyal guys I used to command. After the Ethan family empire crumbled, he took the cash I gave him, started his own gig, and evolved into one of the top cybersecurity gods in the entire country. I laid it all out for him. Without a second thought, Logan and his crew pulled an all-nighter, building me the ultimate counter-strike plan. We weaponized the exact same backdoor Wesley had left open, but we didn't just fix the rigged numbers. We planted a nasty little reverse program. Right in the middle of the signing ceremony, it would broadcast, in real time, a high-definition playback of Wesley tampering with the back-end data. With the trap set, I slapped 2 folders down on my desk. Folder number 1, the bogus contract Wesley was praying I'd sign. Folder number 2, a fully optimized, error-free master plan that actually bumped our profit margins by 20%. Oh, Wesley was in for the surprise of a lifetime. A surprise at the signing ceremony he would take to his absolute grave. Scarlett definitely noticed me acting sketchy over the last few days. I was burning the midnight oil, looking totally dead inside, but she never pried. Instead, like clockwork, a glass of warm milk would magically appear on my desk every single night. The morning of the big event, right as I was walking out the door, she stopped me. She reached up, gently smoothing out my wrinkled collar. Her touch was so soft. Looking dead into my eyes, she whispered, "I believe in you. Just go out there and take what's yours." Just a few simple words, but they pumped my veins with pure adrenaline and unshakable confidence. I looked down at her, giving a firm nod. Just wait for me to come home. As for Wesley, his day of reckoning was finally here. I would absolutely never let another soul hurt her again. Down at the signing ceremony conference room, the energy was absolutely electric, yet insanely tense. Heavyweight media outlets had their telephoto lenses and cameras locked and loaded. Flashbulbs were going off like a war zone. This team-up between Scarlett's empire and Wesley's company was a massive strategic power play, and the entire industry was watching like a hawk. Wesley sat directly across from me, practically vibrating with joy. He kept throwing cheesy waves at the reporters. The sheer, sickening smugness on his face was impossible to hide. He kept looking at me like a cat playing with a doomed mouse, so much fake pity. He honestly believed that I, the disgraced crown prince, was about to be completely slaughtered by his own 2 hands today. Scarlett sat right by my side. Her face was totally stoic, but the way she was squeezing the life out of my hand gave away how terrified she actually was. I gently flipped my hand, tapping the back of hers, throwing her a look that said, "I've got this." The ceremony officially kicked off. Both legal teams did their little dance, verifying the final contracts. Everything was playing out exactly to Wesley's twisted script. Finally, the MC grabbed the mic. "Representatives from both sides, please approach the stage for the official signing." Wesley sharply adjusted his suit jacket and stood up, grinning like an absolute psychopath. I slowly pushed my chair back and stood up with him. Just as we took a step toward the table to sign our lives away, I suddenly broke the silence. "Hold on a second." I didn't yell, but in that dead quiet room, my voice echoed like a sudden crack of thunder, and everyone froze, staring at me like I'd grown a second head. Wesley's sickening smile instantly vanished. "Assistant Ethan, what is the meaning of this?" He furrowed his brows, trying to sound offended. "Do you have some kind of issue with the contract? Didn't our legal teams just confirm everything is flawless?" I stared right back at him, a cold smirk forming on my lips. Oh, the contract itself is fine. It's the rigged technical specs hiding behind it that I have a problem with. The second those words dropped, Wesley's face went completely pale, but he quickly snapped out of it, barking back at me. What kind of garbage are you spewing? Our tech teams ran joint tests on every single parameter. There is zero chance of a glitch. Wesley struck first, acting like a rabid dog backed into a corner. You're just faking it to look smart, he barked. You just want to play to the crowd and wreck our signing ceremony, don't you? He was desperately trying to muddy the waters, hoping to shut me down before I could explain. But sadly for him, I was done playing nice. Whether it's garbage or not, let's let everyone see for themselves. Ignoring his frantic shouting, I just calmly snapped my fingers. Instantly, the massive screen at the back of the conference room flared to life. But instead of the boring ceremony slides, a dark, heavy computer back-end interface flashed before everyone's eyes. Lines of glowing red code flickered across the screen. It was the exact malware Logan's team had secretly planted. The screen projected an IP address that, just 3 nights ago, had logged into the core server and maliciously altered a file named Core Parameters of the 7th Chip. The before and after datasets were slapped side by side, and that tiny, fatal discrepancy in the 6th decimal place was blown up massively, glaring like a neon sign for all to see. Every single person in that room was a hardcore industry veteran. It took them half a second to realize what this meant. Chaos completely erupted. The moment Wesley realized what was on the screen, all the blood drained from his face, leaving him pale as a ghost. He stood there shaking violently, pointing a trembling finger at me while choking on his own words. But I wasn't going to show any mercy. Grabbing the microphone, my voice echoed, cold and piercing. Mr. Wesley, are you about to tell us this was just a little oopsie by your tech guys? Because it doesn't matter. We pulled the server login logs too. The screen aggressively swapped to show the exact login credentials from that night. The operator's ID and the exact Wi-Fi network they used were exposed in crystal clear high definition. The network name? It belonged right to Wesley's personal office. The evidence was an absolute slam dunk. He was dead to rights. Wesley's legs completely gave out. He collapsed into his chair, looking like a dead man walking, as the media went into a frenzy, flashing cameras relentlessly in his face. The lead partner turned completely livid. He shot out of his seat, jabbing a furious finger at Wesley. Wesley, you absolute scum. You dare use such filthy tricks. My company will never, ever do business with a crooked operation like yours. Watching Wesley squirm like a pathetic bug under the crushing weight of public ruin, I didn't feel a single drop of pity. I simply clicked the next button on the remote. Everyone, I called out, snapping the room's attention right back to me. Sure, we hit a nasty little speed bump just now, but that doesn't mean this partnership is dead in the water. Boom. A brand new, ultra-polished project blueprint splashed across the massive display. It was my masterstroke. I had burned the midnight oil crafting this ultimate counterattack. This is an upgraded, elite version our team built straight off the original blueprint. Not only have we completely crushed the technical death trap that Mr. Wesley tried to sneak in, but by supercharging the core algorithms, we can crank the project's final profit margin up by an extra 20%. I delivered the pitch with absolute, unshakable confidence. The partner's eyes literally sparkled with greed and excitement. He aggressively snatched the document from my hands, his jaw dropping further with every single line he devoured. This is genius. Pure, unadulterated genius. He made the call right then and there. We are immediately tearing up all contracts with Wesley's dumpster fire of a company. Instead, we want to fully greenlight your proposal, Mr. Ethan, and forge a massive strategic alliance with Scarlett's company. The entire room absolutely exploded into roaring, deafening applause. Every single eye in the room was locked on me, practically worshiping the ground I walked on. Thanks to his pathetic commercial fraud and dirty sabotage, Wesley was violently dragged out of the building by a swarm of security guards. Even as they hauled him away, he was foaming at the mouth, glaring daggers at me and screaming absolute filth. Honestly, I didn't care. He was a bug on my windshield. I turned to meet Scarlett's fiery, intense gaze. She strutted right up to me, and right in front of the flashing cameras, she threw her arms around me in a fiercely tight hug. Then, with a proud, almost cocky whisper, pressed right against my ear loud enough for the front row to catch, she purred, "Welcome back, my Mr. Ethan." Right then and there, the illusion shattered. I wasn't just her special assistant anymore, and I definitely wasn't that broken guy flipping meat at a barbecue stall. I was Ethan, the man who had clawed his way back from rock bottom to stand at the absolute peak. That brutal, flawless counterattack at the ceremony turned me into a business legend overnight. After 5 agonizing years in the shadows, my name sent shockwaves through the entire corporate world. The king had finally returned to his throne. The message was terrifyingly clear. A monster with ruthless skills and lethal tactics had just taken his rightful place at Scarlett's side. As for Wesley, his company bled out from the massive scandal. Their stock tanked to zero, and they were wiped off the face of the market forever. As for that scumbag himself, he was staring down a long, brutal prison sentence for commercial fraud. The night the dust finally settled, the company threw a massive victory bash in my honor. I was swallowed by a sea of people, clinking glasses left and right, drowning in a flood of endless praise and flashy compliments. But honestly, my mind was a million miles away. Scarlett had made a brief cameo right at the start, dropped a few polite words, and then bolted out the door with a quick excuse. I finally managed to peel myself away from the suffocating crowd and headed straight back to the office. I just had to see her. When I reached her office, the door was left cracked open just a sliver. A fiercely heated argument was echoing from the other side. "Miss Scarlett, you acted way too recklessly on this," an older, highly agitated voice barked out. I immediately recognized it as Uncle Arthur, one of our most veteran board members. Is it really worth completely nuking our relationship with the Wesley family, all for some guy named Ethan? Sure, Wesley himself might have crashed and burned, but his family's foundation is still rock solid. Their connections and massive distribution channels down in South America are the absolute key to our next strategic move. Have you even considered the catastrophic losses we'll face if you sever all ties with them right this second? Another director chimed in, piling on the pressure. Exactly, Miss Scarlett. We all admit that Ethan is insanely talented, but if you let your personal feelings dictate company business like this, it's going to crush the morale of everyone else in this building. I completely froze right there in the hallway, my feet glued to the floor, unable to move a single inch. Severing all business ties with the Wesleys? I only knew that Wesley himself was totally finished, but I had absolutely no idea that Scarlett had been pulling so many strings behind the scenes, just to exact vengeance on my behalf. She hadn't even blinked at the thought of sacrificing such massive corporate interests for me. From inside the room, Scarlett's voice sliced through the tension, cold, sharp, and carrying an absolutely unquestionable authority. She fired back a single phrase, "My rules are the only rules." Then came the deafening slam of her palm violently hitting the desk. Anyone who even dares to lay a finger on Ethan is messing with my life. Let me make this crystal clear one last time. Starting today, sever every single business dealing with the Wesley family and anyone affiliated with them. I will personally swallow every last dime of the resulting financial losses myself. If anyone here still has a problem with that, you can hand in your resignation letter right now. The office instantly flatlined into a dead, suffocating silence as I stood paralyzed outside. My heart felt like it was being brutally crushed by some invisible, heavy hand. Pure shock, overwhelming emotion, and an indescribable ache surged wildly through my chest. It turned out she had been fighting in the shadows all along, violently clearing every obstacle in my path and single-handedly holding up the sky above me. And yet, there I was blinded by my own pathetic, fragile ego, actually suspecting she was just throwing charity my way to humiliate me. For the very first time, it hit me with absolute crystal clarity. Her feelings for me could never be boiled down to a simple debt of gratitude. Taking a deep, shaky breath, I pushed open the heavy office door. The old guard board members whipped their heads toward me, their faces instantly twisting into awkward, deer-in-the-headlights expressions. But the split second Scarlett locked eyes with me, every single one of her sharp defensive edges and her icy demeanor completely melted away. Her intense gaze softened instantly, as if the ruthless, bloodthirsty queen who had just terrified the entire boardroom was nothing more than an illusion. Completely ignoring the suits in the room, I marched straight up to her desk. Under the shell-shocked stares of everyone present, I reached out and, for the very first time, boldly wrapped my fingers around hers. Her hand felt a little cold. "Thank you," I breathed out, my voice barely above a whisper. Honestly, those two words were the only things I could physically force past the lump in my throat right then. Scarlett's body gave a tiny shudder, and she instantly squeezed my hand back for dear life, her slender fingertips trembling against mine. With me, you never have to say those words. Deep within her soft voice, there was a raw, barely perceptible catch of emotion. The massive wall of ice I had built around my heart, forged from years of grinding low self-esteem and bitter paranoia, finally shattered into a million pieces at that exact moment. The veteran board members exchanged nervous glances, quickly read the room, and quietly slinked out the door, leaving us alone. With just the two of us left standing in that massive office, I held onto her hand for a long time, stubbornly refusing to ever let it go. I realized then and there that I needed to get to know the incredible woman standing before me all over again and deeply re-examine the fiery bond between us. I started to seriously suspect that her hunting me down and forcing me back to her side wasn't just driven by some twisted, paranoid possessiveness after all. Could there actually be a much deeper, darker reason behind all of this, one that I was completely oblivious to? A burning, powerful curiosity about Scarlett's hidden past ignited inside me. I immediately began flexing the high-level security clearance she had granted me, quietly digging into everything she had survived over these past 5 years. And man, what I uncovered left me absolutely, completely shell-shocked. Scarlett's last 5 years weren't just a success story. They were the makings of a total, undeniable legend. She went from being a penniless, desperate young girl hunted like an animal by her own blood to brutally carving out a dominant foothold in a hellscape like the Golden Triangle, eventually building the untouchable corporate empire she ruled today. The raw suffering, the vicious betrayals, and the sheer amount of bloodshed it took to get there were leagues beyond anything a normal person could ever begin to fathom. But honestly, none of that was what shocked me the most. The thing that truly shook me to my absolute core was something else entirely. While I was digging around, I stumbled across a standalone server. She had locked this thing down tight, using the absolute highest level of security clearance. The server's code name? Sirius. It sounded just like my name, Yan, and it also happened to be my favorite star in the sky. My heart slammed against my ribs, and this crazy, intense premonition completely washed over me. I desperately tried to crack the server's password, typing in every single date, number, and memory I knew that was connected to her. Every single attempt failed, but just as I was about to throw in the towel, my fingers moved on their own, tapping out a string of Morse code on the keyboard. It spelled out, "I love you," the very first code I ever taught her, just out of pure boredom, back when she used to stay at my old villa. Moving like a man possessed, I slowly punched that exact string of code right into the input field. A soft chime rang out. The password was a match, and the server's encryption instantly vanished. I couldn't stop my hands from violently shaking. I braced myself, but inside that server, there weren't any of the dirty corporate secrets I had been expecting. Instead, there was just a collection of encrypted folders, and every single one of them was tied directly to me. The investigation report on the collapse of the Ethan Group, a master list of every person involved, complete with criminal evidence, and a detailed acquisition plan to track down all of the Ethan family's lost assets. Barely able to keep my hand steady, I clicked open the very first folder. Inside was a literal mountain of documents, detailed to a terrifying, borderline obsessive degree. Ever since the Ethan family empire collapsed overnight, 5 long years ago, Scarlett had been working in the shadows, quietly investigating every single dirty detail of the entire tragedy. She tracked the movements of every single traitor who had stabbed my father in the back. She dug up all their dirt, gathered rock-solid criminal evidence, and organized the whole thing with absolute perfection. She had even built a massive, underground information network, just to monitor every single breath our enemies took. I frantically clicked open another folder, and what I saw inside blew my mind even more. All these years, while she was out there literally fighting for her life in the Golden Triangle, she had also been secretly buying back my family's assets, the ones scattered across the globe after our bankruptcy. She spared absolutely zero expense, reclaiming my legacy, piece by bloody piece. She even set up a massive revenge fund, totally off the books, right under my name. Every single penny in that account had been painstakingly gathered just for me. Absolutely everything she did. None of it was for herself. She didn't build this ruthless underworld empire just to become some untouchable queen. She did it all for me, for a pathetic stray dog who she thought had abandoned her all those years ago. She had been hoarding all the ammunition I would ever need to make my glorious comeback. Her tracking me down and violently forcing me back to her side, it wasn't just some crazy sudden whim, and it definitely wasn't an excuse to humiliate me. No, she did it because she knew the time was finally right. She finally had enough power to protect me, to help me carve out my bloody revenge. I just sat there staring at the endless rows of text and charts on the screen, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the mouse. My eyes instantly burned red, and my vision completely blurred with hot tears. It turned out, me running away, me thinking I was doing the noble thing by not being a burden to her, in her eyes, that was the ultimate, most agonizing betrayal. I had spent the last 5 years wallowing in pathetic self-pity, flipping barbecue in some dusty border town. But this woman, she had been carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders, paving a smooth, blood-soaked path for my revenge. What a colossal bastard I am. What the hell have I even been doing with my life? I snapped up from my chair, my chest violently heaving as I gasped for air. Crushing guilt, profound shock, agonizing heartache, and deep regret. 1,000 different emotions violently crashed into me, completely tearing my soul apart. I totally lost it, clutching the glowing tablet tightly against my chest. I charged out of that office like an absolute madman. I had to find her. Right now, I needed to see her this very instant. I brutally kicked open the door to Scarlett's bedroom. She was just getting ready for bed, slipping into a delicate silk nightgown. Seeing me burst into her room, completely unhinged and out of breath, she was visibly stunned. Ethan. Before she could even finish my name, I closed the distance in 2 strides and slammed the tablet down hard onto the table right in front of her. What the hell is this? I pointed furiously at the folders on the screen. My voice shook with raw, unchecked emotion as my bloodshot eyes locked onto hers. Why did you do this? Why didn't you just tell me? Scarlett glanced down at the cracked server files glowing on the screen, and the color instantly drained from her beautiful face. She stood there in dead silence for a moment. She didn't answer right away. She just slowly tilted her head up, meeting my frantic gaze with total quiet. Her eyes looked so calm on the surface, but underneath, it was a bottomless ocean, drowning in years of silent grievance, desperate longing, and agonizing pain. What felt like an eternity passed before she finally opened her mouth, her voice incredibly raspy. Tell you? She let out a dry, self-deprecating little laugh. Tell you, just so you could feed me that same old excuse about not wanting to be a burden, just so you could vanish from my sight for another 5 years? I was terrified. She looked up at me, a heartbreaking trace of raw vulnerability in her voice that I had never ever seen from her before. I was so terrified you wouldn't want what I had to give. I was terrified you'd just run away again. My eyes filled with water. Ethan, I really can't survive you leaving me without a word ever again. Every single syllable she spoke was like a jagged knife, twisting viciously into my heart. I squeezed my eyes shut in absolute agony. The reason I left back then. I forced the words out with agonizing difficulty, finally confessing the heavy secret that had been suffocating me for 5 long years. It was because, right before my father died, he warned me that the forces who destroyed our family were unfathomably powerful. He begged me to hide, to never even dream of revenge. I was terrified that a pathetic stray dog like me would drag a fatal disaster right to your doorstep. I thought I'd drag you straight down to hell with me. That's why I ran. It was never because I didn't want you, you absolute bastard. Before I could even finish my sentence, Scarlett lunged forward, whipping a vicious backhand right across my face. That slap was so much heavier, so much harsher than the one back at the hotel. But the very next second, her tears spilled over without any warning. Like a woman possessed, she started hammering her fist against my chest, striking with such desperate force. It felt like she wanted to shatter me into a million pieces. You bastard, you absolute, she sobbed uncontrollably, gasping for air between every frantic strike. I waited for you for 5 years. I searched for you for 5 damn years. I thought once you made your comeback, once you found success and fame, you'd look down on me. I thought you just got sick of me. I thought you'd long forgotten about a woman like me. A woman with hands covered in blood. All those bitter misunderstandings, all those silent grievances erupted in this exact moment, pouring out right alongside her tears and her relentless fists. I just let her hit me. I made no attempt to dodge, and I didn't dare fight back. Instead, I wrapped my arms fiercely around her, pulling her into a crushing, desperate embrace. I'm sorry. I whispered the apology into her ear over and over, my own voice cracking with a heavy sob. I am so sorry, Scarlett. I was wrong. I was so wrong. She wailed in my arms like a lost little girl, utterly stripped of her usual icy, queen-like demeanor. Her tears were scorching hot, soaking right through my shirt and burning a hole straight into my heart. After a long time, her crying finally slowed, leaving only muffled, heavy hiccups. She lifted her head from my chest, her eyes completely red and swollen. The sharp, icy edge in her gaze had completely melted away. In its place was an endless, deep affection, shadowed by an intense, trembling insecurity. Are you really never going to leave me again? She asked, her voice shaking so hard it broke. Her eyes burned with an almost startling, desperate intensity. She cupped my face in both her hands, staring right into my soul. Ethan, do your words from 5 years ago still stand? I knew exactly what she meant. That one sacred promise. Once I take back everything, my life and my body will belong completely to you. I didn't give her a verbal answer. Instead, I just leaned down and pressed a deep, heavy kiss right against her cool, unbelievably soft lips. That kiss carried 5 long years of desperate yearning, 5 years of bitter misunderstanding, 5 years of sheer agony and profound regret. But it also carried the absolute ecstasy of reclaiming my lost love, fueled by a ruthless determination to never, ever let her go again. When we finally broke apart, Both of us were completely breathless. I rested my forehead against hers, staring at her beautifully flushed cheeks and her glistening, swollen lips. From this moment on, I whispered fiercely against her ear, using the most serious, unwavering tone of my entire life, emphasizing every single syllable. Your life belongs to me, and your body belongs to me too. I paused for a split second, a confident smirk curling on my lips as I adopted an aggressive, commanding tone to declare my absolute ownership. And you, Scarlett, along with everything that is yours. From a single strand of your hair all the way down to the tips of your toes. From this exact second into eternity, all of it belongs entirely to me. Scarlett let out a breathtaking, beautiful laugh. Her smile was so radiant, it felt like it could melt an entire winter's worth of ice and snow. She rose up on her tiptoes and kissed me right back. Fine, she whispered breathlessly. It's a deal. The massive, freezing mountain of ice that had loomed between us for 5 long years was finally, completely shattered. The very next day, Scarlett's corporate empire underwent a massive, earth-shattering upheaval. I was no longer just her special assistant. Instead, as the new co-CEO, I officially stepped directly into the spotlight. Scarlett and I had become an unstoppable power couple in every sense of the word. The explosive news that Ethan, the fallen crown prince of the elite financial circle, had returned alongside the ruthless queen of the Golden Triangle to exact their bloody revenge dropped like a massive bombshell, sending violent shockwaves through the entirety of high society. The cowardly enemies who had once kicked me while I was down, greedily carving up my family's assets, were now sweating bullets in absolute panic. Our relentless campaign of vengeance had officially commenced. All my hesitation, gone. I unleashed the criminal evidence Scarlett had spent the last 5 years digging up. It was more than enough dirt to drag those monsters straight down to hell. I mixed it with the cutthroat business strategies I had memorized, setting the stage for our very first ambush. Target number 1, Uncle Arthur. The first snake to betray my father, and the greedy bastard who swallowed the largest chunk of the Ethan family estate. A man I used to actually look up to, a guy I lovingly called Uncle for over 10 years. We hit him with a brutally synchronized, 2-pronged assault. Scarlett pulled strings across her massive network, anonymously dumping ironclad proof of Arthur's tax evasion and shady trades right onto the Fed's desks. Meanwhile, I played the capital markets. I took our massive revenge fund, backed by astronomical cash, and delivered a totally devastating, crushing blow to his company's stock. First, I teamed up with global short sellers to drop some absolutely damning research reports, completely shattering market confidence. Then, as his stock went into a massive freefall, we used leveraged funds to pull off a ruthless, hostile takeover. Start to finish, it took exactly 3 days for Uncle Arthur's entire corporate empire to collapse like a cheap house of cards. 1 week later, at the emergency board meeting, I kicked open the conference room doors as their brand new majority shareholder. The second Uncle Arthur laid eyes on me, his jaw hit the floor. He looked like he had just seen a ghost, pointing a violently shaking finger at me. His face went pale as a sheet, lips trembling. Ethan, aren't you supposed to be dead? I let out an icy laugh, walking right up to him and staring him down with pure venom. Uncle Arthur, I trust you've been doing well these past 5 years, getting fat off my family's stolen wealth. Tell me, have you been sleeping well at night? His legs completely gave out. He slid right out of his leather chair and collapsed onto his knees, right at my feet. He broke into frantic, pathetic sobs, grabbing at my legs and begging for his life. Ethan, please, for the sake of the close bond our families shared for all those years. Spare me, please. I was forced into doing what I did. Absolutely disgusted, I kicked his filthy hands away. Our close bond? Like when you paid off a driver to crash into my father and murder him? Where was our precious bond then? When you chased me out of the Capitol and sent hitmen to hunt me down like an animal? Where was our bond then? I yanked a document from my tailored suit pocket and slapped it squarely across his pathetic face. This is your equity transfer and your formal resignation. Sign it and get the hell out of sheer respect for the fact you were once my elder. I'm leaving you breathing. As for your crimes, you can spend the rest of your miserable life rotting in a prison cell. I publicly and completely booted his ass out of his very own company. Throughout the whole show, Scarlett just sat elegantly beside me, watching the carnage unfold like she was front row at a spectacular play. Once the dust finally settled, she walked over, personally pouring me a glass of top-tier champagne, and gently pressed it against my lips. Her eyes were just overflowing with deep admiration, raw fascination, and profound love. Drink up, my king. I took the glass and downed it in a single gulp. But this was just the warm-up. Over the next 2 months, we struck like lightning. using the exact same and sometimes way harsher tactics, systematically erasing every single enemy on our revenge hit list. Those smug corporate tycoons who thought they were untouchable, thrown into prison, one after another, their legacies totally burned to the ground. I didn't just take back everything that rightfully belonged to the Ethan family. I completely devoured our enemies' empires. I was no longer that soft, privileged crown prince who needed his family's name for protection. I had evolved into a cold, ruthless, and infinitely more powerful king of revenge than I was 5 years ago. In the entire business world, there wasn't a single soul who didn't shiver at the name Ethan. Scarlett just gazed at me as I sat in my father's old grand office, pulling strings with absolute mastery. Flashing a smile, she walked over and wrapped her arms around me from behind. You know something? She pressed a soft kiss against my cheek. Compared to that proud, naive crown prince from 5 years ago, I much prefer this cold, ruthless king who fights for me and for our future. I spun my chair around, pulling her tightly into my arms and resting her on my lap. Well, I guess that makes you my queen. I leaned in and captured her lips in a passionate kiss. We were the undisputed king and queen of this brand new world. But deep down, we both knew the real final boss fight hadn't even started yet. But the real mastermind pulling the strings, the one orchestrating all those sick conspiracies, the true monster who destroyed the Ethan family, was still hiding deep in the shadows. That ultimate villain behind our total collapse belonged to a deeply rooted, incredibly low profile, yet god-tier wealthy tycoon family. The family of Old Man Charles. Old Man Charles and my grandfather actually shared a life and death bond, making our households friends for generations. And precisely because of that history, my father had absolutely zero defenses against him back in the day, which let that bastard drive the most fatal, devastating knife straight into his back. The Charles family hid themselves exceptionally well over the years, wiping out almost every single trace and piece of evidence connecting them to the destruction of our family. Yet, Scarlett still managed to dig up a few faint clues. We plotted in the dark for a very long time and finally locked down the absolute perfect opportunity to hit the Charles family head on. The battleground? An international bidding convention for the mining rights of a massive diamond field in Africa. This specific mine was the Charles family's absolute most critical cash cow for the next 10 years. They were dead set on winning it, no matter the cost. And our goal? To snatch this insanely lucrative prize right out of their greedy little mouths. The negotiation table was set aboard a massive, ultra-luxury cruise liner floating out in international waters. Scarlett and I gathered our absolute most elite team and stepped onto that cruise ship. But just as we were locking down the final round of critical negotiations with the Charles family reps, all hell broke loose. Having lost absolutely everything, Wesley, acting like a completely rabid dog, somehow caught wind of our location. He actually dragged 12 desperate thugs along and crashed the negotiation room, guns blazing. Nobody moved. Wesley's eyes were totally bloodshot, looking like an absolute crazed demon, and the barrel of his gun was pointed straight at Scarlett. Scarlett, Ethan, he hissed through gritted teeth, his voice a roaring snarl. You two ruined my freaking life. You brought me to this wretched state. Today, I'm making sure you both go straight down to the grave with me. The idiot clearly intended to hold Scarlett hostage to threaten me or barter with the Charles family for a golden ticket out of here. This entire scene was strikingly similar to 5 years ago when Scarlett had been pinned into a corner by her enemies with absolutely no way out. But this time, everything was different. Without even a fraction of a second's hesitation, I instantly shielded Scarlett, pulling her tightly behind my back. Don't be afraid. I patted her back in a reassuring gesture, my voice terrifyingly calm. I am right here. Then, I lifted my head, staring straight into Wesley's manic eyes. Wesley, do you seriously think you can just walk away from this after crashing my party? I confronted him with absolute icy composure, my mind racing at lightning speed to analyze every single angle. Listen closely. On this ship, there are people from the Charles family. There are my people. And there are top-tier government observers from various nations. If you even think about pulling that trigger right now, you will be absolutely riddled with bullets in the very next second. Your only way out is to drop that weapon right this instant. Do that, and I might just show some mercy for old time's sake, and leave your miserable corpse intact. With just those few ruthless words, I completely shattered the morale of the desperate thugs standing right behind him. They were only in this for the payday, after all. None of them actually wanted to catch a bullet today. But Wesley? He just became even more violently unhinged. Shut up, Ethan. You hypocritical bastard. Do you really think I'll ever believe you again? Completely losing his grip on reality, He let out a blood-curdling shriek, raised his weapon, and lunged straight at Scarlet. But the exact instant he lunged forward, I moved. I slipped to the side like a ghost, perfectly dodging the barrel of his gun, and with a swift, brutal grappling maneuver, I clamped my hand tight onto his wrist, instantly reversing his grip. I gave it a savage twist. Wesley let out a piercing shriek of agony as the pistol slipped from his fingers, clattering uselessly onto the floor. I didn't give him a single second to breathe. Executing a clean, bone-crushing shoulder throw, I slammed him brutally against the hard floor. Then, I stomped my foot squarely down onto his chest, the crushing force instantly making him cough up a nasty spray of blood. The entire beatdown unfolded in the literal blink of an eye. Every single person in that room was left completely speechless, staring in sheer shock. Scarlet's personal bodyguards and the ship's heavy security finally snapped back to their senses. In an instant, they swarmed forward in a massive wave, completely subduing Wesley and every single one of his remaining thugs. With the crisis totally crushed, I didn't even spare another glance at that trash on the floor. I just turned around, walking right back to Scarlet, her face still carrying a trace of lingering shock, but it was mostly filled with utter amazement. I walked right up to her, reaching out a hand to gently tuck a stray lock of hair that the wind had blown out of place. My movements were incredibly tender. It made me look like an entirely different person from the ruthless guy who had just completely dismantled Wesley a moment ago. It felt exactly like 5 years ago in that dark, bleak warehouse, when she had carefully wiped the blood from my wounds. I told you not to be afraid. I looked at her and offered a gentle smile. I'm right here. Scarlet stared back at me, looking at the man who had shielded her so securely behind his back, taking the brunt of every single danger for her sake. Her eyes shone with a brilliant, blinding light. She finally understood that the man standing right in front of her no longer needed her protection. He had already grown into a towering force, capable of shielding her from absolutely any storm, standing firmly right by her side as an equal. And as I gazed at the absolute trust and deep love overflowing from her eyes, my heart was flooded with an unprecedented sense of profound fulfillment. This was the true meaning behind my return. The long, bitter chapter of vengeance had finally come to a close. Wesley was handed over directly to Interpol. The Charles family, heavily crippled by their massive loss at the bidding convention and the absolute mountain of dirt we leaked right after, suffered a devastating blow to their core foundations. Ultimately, they were forced to withdraw from the competition, left barely scraping by just to survive. Joining forces, Scarlet and I not only reclaimed absolutely everything that belonged to the Ethan family, but we also expanded our corporate territory several times over. A brand new conglomerate, spanning across multiple major industries, was successfully built by our very own hands. I no longer needed the title of the financial circle's crown prince to validate myself, because the name Ethan had itself become synonymous with the absolute pinnacle of success. Scarlet and I had become the most compelling, high-profile legend of our generation. Once every single matter had been settled, I took Scarlet back to the capital city. We returned to that private villa nestled halfway up the mountain, the exact place where I had saved her life all those years ago. Everything here had been preserved exactly as it was 5 years ago. I dismissed all the household staff, and on a beautifully clear afternoon, out in the villa's back garden, I set up a familiar barbecue grill. I shed my expensive tailored suit, changing into a simple, ordinary t-shirt. Just like those days back in that small border town 5 years ago, I busied myself with the mundane task of threading meat onto skewers. Scarlet sat right nearby in a wicker chair, watching me with a radiant smile brimming in her eyes. The sunlight spilled over her, making the entire scene look incredibly warm and beautiful. I painstakingly recreated the exact flavor of my old barbecue stall, grilling the skewers for her and her alone. The rich aroma of cumin and chili powder wafted through the air. I handed her the very first finished skewer of pork kidneys. Here, try it. Your Majesty, see if your humble servant's skills have gone downhill. Scarlet took the skewer from my hand, but didn't take a bite. She simply stared at me, her gaze so incredibly tender, it felt like it could melt right into water. Ethan, yeah, I don't want to be the queen anymore, she said softly. It's far too exhausting. I set down the grilling tongs and walked over to her, kneeling down as I took her hands in mine. All right, then I will take care of you from now on. Scarlet let out a soft laugh and gently shook her head. Thinking she didn't believe me, I pulled a document right from my pocket. I hadn't prepared a diamond ring. I felt those things were way too cliché and they simply didn't suit her. What I pulled out instead was an equity transfer agreement. This represents a 51% controlling stake in our new empire. From this moment on, all of it belongs to you. I looked into her eyes and said with absolute sincerity, I told you before, everything I have belongs entirely to you. Scarlett looked down at the document, an agreement powerful enough to send massive shockwaves through the entire financial world. Yet, she didn't even bat an eyelash. She merely smiled, reached out, and took the piece of paper from my hands. Then, right before my eyes, she tore it completely to shreds. The scraps of paper drifted through the air like falling snowflakes. "You idiot!" She rose from the wicker chair, wrapping her arms around my waist from behind, burying her face tightly against my back. Her warm breath seeped right through the thin fabric of my shirt, pressing against my skin. "The thing I wanted was never your money." Standing up on her tiptoes, her breath felt like sweet orchids against my ear. "I only want you." My heart was instantly filled to the absolute brim by those 4 words. I spun around, locking her into a fierce, tight embrace, leaning down to find her lips and kissing her deeply. This kiss was entirely devoid of all the pain and struggle of our past, leaving behind nothing but an endless, profound tenderness and love. That is the end of our hero's journey. Drop a like if you enjoyed the story. Do not forget to hit that follow button. This channel will keep bringing you the absolute best web novel and comic recaps.